University of Dundee. My area is educational research, where I'm module lead on the Master of Education programme. Also work with doctoral students as well, both on the PhD and professional doctorate programme in educational leadership. I'm looking forward to hearing from everybody today, and over to Niamh Lafferty. Is Niamh there?
Yes.
There, sorry, couldn't find my microphone button. How are you? Hi, so yeah, I'm Niamh Lafferty. I think I know some of the people on the list already, and then some will be totally new to you. I'm a university lecturer at the University of Limerick in Ireland, and my area is education leadership as well. I'm course director for the Masters of School Leadership, and then I'm also some of you I think are on the educational leadership PhD in UL as well, and I would have been in charge of bringing that to the forefront and getting that across. So very invested in that as well. So yeah, my areas of research are all educational leadership, a lot of focus on the role of social identity, emotions, and organizational culture in looking at leadership research. And I think, am I passing to Judy or Niamh? Other Niamh?
Yeah, Niamh Hickey.
So yeah, my name's Niamh Hickey, and I have the privilege of working with these three women here who have just introduced ourselves as part of this Emergent research interest group. I see we've been joined by Beth here. I think, Beth, you were having a tiny bit of technical difficulties, but we're here and we're ready to go. And I'm so excited that you're here joining us because like that, there is so much that we're juggling as part of doctoral research or master's research as well. So I think, you know, what you have to say, as well as insights into your values piece around leadership in response to the pandemic, we're really looking forward to. So Judy, will I pass it back to you to just give an introduction to yourself, and I can pass it over then to Beth.
Thanks very much, Niamh. Okay, everyone. So as you may have seen from the information that we provided regarding this session, we're going to hear from Beth in a moment, and the session title is Keeping the Faith, Researching Educational Values and the Juggle of Completing a Doctorate Alongside Family Life. I'm really eagerly awaiting what Beth has to share with us this morning. Educational leadership brings us all to this meeting today, and we have that shared interest, but Beth is going to give her unique perspective on that. So when you're ready, Beth, we're going to hand over to you. Oh, before we start, can I just check that everyone is happy for this session to be recorded? You should already be aware, but just in case. Perfect. Okay, Beth, over to you.
Hello, nice to meet everybody, and thank you to Niamh and the team for inviting me to come and talk today. So I've recently finished my doctorate, which is a pretty big news, lots of celebrations after about 7 years. So it's been quite a long journey, and one that I'm now able to reflect on and feeling really proud that I was able to do that. So I wanted to come first of all to talk about my research, just to let you know kind of my research focus and about my interests, and then talk a little bit about my journey and just answer some questions if you have any for me. So my current role is working at the University of Derby as a senior lecturer in ITE. It was something that I've wanted to do for a really long time, and part of my journey with my doctorate has led me here. So I'm really grateful for that. In a previous life, I was a teacher and humanities teacher, specializing in history, and a Senko. So really interested in adaptive teaching and leadership in SEND as well. And I also, alongside lecturing, I still tutor students with SEND who are really struggling at school, as it's something that I really enjoy and kind of really believe in. So that's my other day job. So I in 2017 I completed my Masters in Educational Leadership and Management through the University of Warwick, and really enjoyed that kind of research journey. It was something that I did. Oh, it's slightly mad actually, because I started that just after I went back to work after having my daughter. But I think for me personally, it was something that I wanted to do because to keep my brain active and to remind myself of kind of that I can be a researcher as well as alongside being a new mum. So it was a little bit mad at the time, but I really enjoyed it. And my thesis for my master's was looking at how you manage non-directed time. So I was looking at that sort of grey area in teaching where teachers are paid for a certain amount of hours a day. I think it's 6.25 hours. And you actually can't do all of their job within those hours. And so are often expected to put in extra time beyond the classroom, beyond the school, in their home lives and at weekends. And as a leader in a school, how do you kind of manage expectations? How do you encourage people to put that time in? Because if it's non-directed, there isn't a specific amount of time that people have to put in. So that's what I was interested in at the time, and really looking into aspects of distributed and collaborative leadership. And I was interviewing volunteers as well, so looking at teachers who also volunteered their time to do extra beyond just the curriculum. And my oh, pardon, was that a question? No, okay. So part of my interest there was, as I say, looking into collaborative leadership. My thesis from my master's was published, which was really exciting. And that was the moment my supervisor at the time at Warwick said, had you thought about doing an Ed.D? And I hadn't really until that point. And the more I thought about it, the more actually, yes, I would like to do that. I'd like to extend my knowledge, my understanding of leadership. And my decision to do it was very much for myself, just because I really enjoy research. I enjoy writing. And yeah, so it's kind of maybe a little bit selfish in that, yeah, I wasn't so much thinking about the impact it might have in other areas of my life. It was kind of a bit of a burning desire of mine to kind of follow that. So my thesis itself, there's a journey involved with this, because I started one track with my Ed.D and my research, and it was to do with school priorities and how it's to do with shared values, school priorities. How do leaders ensure that there are shared values in the school in order to help meet their priorities? And then COVID happened. I had to take some time off, which I'll talk about in kind of like the next segment of my talk. And I realised that my original research ideas were no longer applicable to the educational climate. And at the point that happened, I needed to collect data. And so I'd already done a literature review around my original kind of plan. And then, as I say, realised it was no longer appropriate. So the thing that actually inspired me to change direction, and this is why this talk is called Keeping the Faith. I was working in a Catholic school at the time, and there was an email sent out by the principal during lockdown saying about the Catholic family and how they were going to support each other in this time of difficulty and kind of look into the wider community. And that sort of just really resonated with me in terms of the support that schools were giving to the community at the time, but also within the schools, what was kind of happening in terms of supporting students and staff. And so I ended up changing tack completely. I was originally going to have like a mixed methods research project with some quantitative elements in it. And because of the difficult time that everybody was going through, I decided that I would have a qualitative approach. And I wanted to look into how the school's religious values were shaping their response to COVID-19. So, yeah, big change of tack. Had to have a new ethics and get that passed through. And I ended up interviewing teachers right at the end of the first lockdown, COVID-19. got some incredibly rich data, transcribed over 50,000 words. I transcribed more words than I wrote in my actual thesis. And it was a really, really interesting thing to be doing. So, as I said, it was a qualitative approach. I really wanted to get the narrative of what was going on, that kind of recognition that this was a phenomenon, and sort of nobody had experienced in education this kind of thing before. So it turned into a case study, because it was only one school that I was investigating. And I looked at the religious values of the school, and they used a particular set of Jesuit religious values with pairings of specific values. So the one I'm going to particularly talk about in a second is compassionate and loving. That was a really prominent value that came out of this research. So I had to first of all understand what the values in the school were before COVID-19, and then how they translated into the decisions about what was happening at the time. And I at first thought that this was a really big change of tack. I was like, oh my goodness, you know, where did my previous research interest play into this? And actually, my interest in collaborative leadership and leadership styles really played into my new research focus, because I was also looking at crisis leadership, because it was up to the leaders to work out how to impart these values. And as part of the literature review and exploration of literature around the topic, there's a lot of literature out there about the importance of values within Catholic schools. So it was about how leaders were trying to ensure that those values were still happening. Pastoral values were really strong. That was something that they were able to kind of really carry out, supporting the community. But actually, things like collective worship, although that's not a value in itself, it's a way of creating a Catholic community. And actually, that is part of the values of the school, the community, the family kind of vibe that started me off on this journey in the first place. And a way of imparting Catholic values was through collective worship. So how do you do that online when everything's kind of gone up in the air? And also the ideas about the whole child, and how Catholic education is hoping to be holistic. How, when you've got an online curriculum where lots of children are not engaging, can you still have that holistic attitude to education? So these were lots of questions that kind of came out of my findings. And it was really interesting. So some of the key themes that came out. So I used a thematic approach to coding and analysing my data, both through the documents as part of the case study that the school was releasing at the time. I was looking into their policies, and through the interviews that I'd conducted as well. And there were themes to do with pastoral care, compassionate and loving in particular. There was a lot of positive work that was done by the school to support the students and their families. They had pastoral phone calls home. Every student was called at least once a fortnight to check in how they were doing, but also talking to the family. They increased their support through going out into the community and supporting through food packages, and they were giving out Easter eggs, and they were doing like Friday night pizza nights, takeaway nights. Those actions really increased during the lockdown. And one of the really interesting things that was observed was at the start of lockdown, when actually the curriculum was kind of up in arms. Like, people were like, how do we deliver an online curriculum? And this direction came from the diocese. They said, well, while we can't focus on the curriculum so much, we're going to focus on pastoral care. And so that element was really, really strong. We then had, I'm saying issue, that's the wrong word, but we had a change in focus during lockdown, where there was a much more of a focus of concern about gaps in knowledge that were accumulating for children. And if you looked at the kind of directions from the DFE and also from the diocese, this was sort of looking at how an online curriculum can close the gaps in knowledge and prepare students for returning to school. And during that time, there was this shift between really being able to focus on the pastoral care and Catholic values being really emulated and developed and strengthened. And suddenly data came back on the scene, and there was data collection points, and teachers were concerned about how they would be able to fill the gaps in knowledge once they returned to school. There were the catch-up plans, and year 11s were going to have extra lessons when they got back to school. And so during that time frame, there was this shift in how the school could ensure that the values that were obviously really important to them kind of persisted and were maintained and made a priority, which is why it was linked to my original research. So some other themes throughout this, I was looking at crisis leadership, sort of adaptive leadership models, again, collaborative leadership came into this. The idea that even the leadership literature that was coming out about COVID-19 was talking about how community was really important, which was an overlap with the Catholic values that I was investigating. So in this school, you know, was there a greater sense of community? Because that was something that was already a priority and fostered. So that was a thread of a theme that ran through this. And this potentially, well, for me, was tremendously interesting, was the idea of permeation of values. And in the literature, there was a lot of discussion about concerns about Catholic identity in Catholic schools, to do with the fact that many Catholic schools in this country no longer have autonomy because they're a state-run school or an academy. And because of this kind of concern for Catholic identity and how values are expressed in the school, there had been certain models put in place about how to impart values. And in the interviews in particular that came up, there were some conflicts in terms of how those values were being modelled. So some people in the leadership team were saying that other members of staff were not modelling Catholic values, and then other members of staff were saying that the leadership team were not modelling Catholic values. And so the permeation of those values, which certainly some of them were really prominent, and it was obvious that that was happening, actually that wasn't the case everywhere. So this was another strand to what I was looking into, like how do you measure, how do you kind of observe the permeation of values within the school. So what happened suddenly from a change of tack because of a global pandemic became this really rich narrative that had many layers of complex meanings to things, and taking strands from lots of different areas of leadership literature, as well as literature that was by Catholic authors and about Catholic education. And I found it absolutely fascinating. So I'm just going to, one second, my main findings to kind of summarize from all of everything that I've just said there. My main findings from this research was that the school emphasised compassionate and loving values through social action and pastoral care, and it seemed to strengthen the school community. Lockdown challenged maintaining a sense of religious community due to the limitations in collective worship. Staff understood Catholic virtues, but the extent to which these values permeated decisions remained unclear. And I think for me personally, that was the most interesting thing that came out of this. And if I was to take my research further, that's the step, that's the direction that I would like to take it in. So there were limitations to my study. This is a case study. One school, very bounded within lockdown. I wasn't able to interview as many people as maybe would have made even richer narratives. So I didn't interview students, and I didn't interview members of the community from beyond the teaching staff, because I was recording these interviews on Zoom, and ethically that just made things very difficult. So there were limitations to what I was doing, but from something that seemed quite small at the time, there were lots of links to wider educational questions, and particularly the links between being pastoral, putting pastoral care as your main focus, and you know, putting the idea of the whole child, of holistic education to the forefront. Is that possible when schools are being judged on their results and Ofsted grades? So that, yeah, as I say, it opened up kind of a wider view of education through that small case study that I was investigating. So that was kind of that is my research. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that before I move on to some of the other things that happened during that journey. Has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask me? Oh, Bernie, I see it. Is that a hand up? No? Okay, so in the title of this talk, I wanted to talk to you as people who were on their research journey about the other things that were happening, not to kind of make a saga out of it, but actually I think it's really important to kind of talk about some of the challenges that come alongside taking on such a huge piece of research, particularly as I was teaching at the time and a parent as well, and just to kind of acknowledge some of the challenges that were there, but also there was light at the end of the tunnel if you are finding things difficult. I'm so pleased that I took part in this research, and yeah, it's going to kind of hopefully take me into even more interesting research path in the future. So one of the reasons that I decided to change tack, and it's one of those things that, like, in hindsight, things would have been very different had this not happened. I had to take some time out from my research because of my father was very ill, and so I took 6 months out, and that was when lockdown happened. So I'd kind of done all of this sort of preparation, and I'd done all the advanced research methods modules and all that. Took 6 months off to help to care for my dad, and lockdown happened during that period. And so in a way it kind of helped me, although I had to make a big decision to change what I was doing, because I'd had to step away from university. I think it gave me a little bit of kind of time and space to think. And at the time, I was really concerned about what I was doing, because it was, yeah, just taking a step away from my original intention. But I think for me as a researcher, and for also just in terms of my own educational values that have definitely developed as a consequence of my findings, particularly in terms of my leadership style and the educator that I would like to be, I'm really pleased that I made that decision to change. So that was unexpected, but I think a real positive thing for me. I've really found looking at that moment in time in education really interesting, and I think the messages that have come out from my research are really important, and I want to take it further. I want to kind of publish my findings and hopefully investigate some of those threads in more detail. And the second thing is that, as I've mentioned, I was kind of negotiating this journey whilst being a parent and whilst teaching as well. I changed jobs several times during my doctorate, so I collected the data from the school that I was at, and then made 2 more changes in employment during that time. So that, you know, big, it's always big, isn't it, changing jobs. And for me, one of the big challenges was about time management. I'm, you know, as a teacher, you're used to juggling lots of balls at the same time, and that was absolutely fine. But because I had a young daughter, and unfortunately my mum, her health declined as well during that period. I'm still looking after my daughter and my mum. I was finding in the holidays I'd have a bigger chunk of time, and I was able to kind of be a bit more selfish with my time and say, look, I'm taking this day. Kira can go to sewing club, and I'm taking that day, and I'm going to do my research then. But one of the bigger challenges was actually, how do you keep chipping away at this when you're, you know, taking your child to swimming lessons and marking A-level coursework and all of those things that happened simultaneously. And I was finding, you know, I'd have to squeeze research in all sorts of strange times. Like if my husband and my daughter were playing on the Xbox, I knew that'd be like 2 hours of a Sunday. So I'm like, right, I've got to go upstairs. I've got to get something done in this time. And because that wasn't necessarily focused time, it was kind of like grabbed time. I wasn't always in the zone. So like motivation to get into it and get my head down and the things done, that was sometimes a bit of a challenge. I found that there's one piece of deep focus music that I found on YouTube that somehow, and I tried loads of them, and it was this one piece. If I put my headphones in and listened to that, for some reason that just helped me get in the zone. So I was kind of finding coping mechanisms to be able to do that. So it's just been a big complex ride. It's been it's been very hard at times. And I would say after my transcription and writing the chapters, that was okay. I think the hardest time for me was about this time last year. It was kind of like that last bit of the marathon, and being able to kind of motivate myself to get those final things done. I did find that pretty tough. I'm lucky I have some great support from my family, and so they did help me through that, and also from my supervisor. I spoke to him about it and kind of gained support from the university when those times kind of got really tough. So yeah, a sometimes challenging journey, but something I absolutely would choose to do again. And now I'm through it, and I've had my Viva passed, and I can actually sort of think about it in a bit more depth. It's something that I'm really proud of, and I hope that at whatever stage you are in your research journey, that that's the final outcome. It's a big undertaking, but in my view, absolutely worth it. So that's my journey. I'm really happy to talk in a little bit more detail about how things were navigated. If anybody has got any questions about what all that was about as well, I'm very happy to talk about things in a little bit more detail. Thank you, Marie. That's very kind.
Thanks so much, Beth. I'll jump in here, and if anyone has any, comments or questions or anything, please feel free to, put up your hands and write them into the chat. But while you're thinking of them and while you're doing that, I just had a few things that I was thinking of there, Beth. I mean, first of all, thanks so much for sharing, both your research and also the journey in, what a task in such a short period of time, and also being cannonballed in after having technical difficulties at the start of it as well. So fair. And like all I can say was I was looking at you, and without even the scaffold of slides or something to anchor your thoughts on in terms of your research, like to be able to articulate it, in such a short space of time. And I guess I was just thinking about, some of the people who have joined us here who are really early on in that stage. And like, it's hard to imagine that you, at that point, that you'd come out of a doctorate knowing your research so well that you can hop on a call and talk about it as eloquently as you have, so I guess I was struck by that. And then the other piece, I suppose, is, I know there's a mix of attendees here in terms of, some of us have completed doctorates and some people are starting off the journey, masters, some people are starting off and so on. And I guess there's none of us that have come out the other side, I would say, that haven't probably had to pivot you know, at some point. And I think what I really took from listening to you, Beth, is that piece around how important that can be and how valuable that can be. And I think, you know, when we talk about, we don't do research for the sake of doing research, you know, we do research with the hope of having impact. And I think, you know, the having the knowledge of, right, when is the time that we need to pivot, and when is the time that I need to hold strong on this is, you know, what it is that I'm looking at, is hugely important in, you know, that ultimate impact that the research can have as well. So I guess that's the other piece that really stuck out to me. And I guess really what I was wondering in terms of a question then, Beth, is just for the people who are here that are just starting off in that journey, what are some things that you would recommend for navigating, you know, whether it be work commitments and study commitments, whether it be family commitments and study, or all of the above, you know, whatever it is that we're juggling. What would you recommend?
I think for me, if I could change something, I would be more direct in asking for the time that I needed. So I was kind of joking a little bit about the Xbox, although that genuinely did happen, and that was kind of one of my moments. I also used to write in a long car journey. I would take my laptop in a long car journey because I thought, well, this is a time where I wouldn't be doing anything else. And actually, in retrospect, with hindsight, I wish I'd been a little bit more selfish with that time and actually said, I need half a day, I need this. So I think, yeah, that thinking about when is good to work for you, and if things need to move about, if you need to sort of be assertive in asking for some of that time, I think that's a really important thing, because as I said, sometimes I had the time, it was kind of given to me as a gift, but actually it wasn't the right time for me to do that thing. And so getting into the zone, you know, I kind of, that could be hard at times. So yeah, I kind of wish at times that I'd been a little bit more assertive and direct about what I needed in order to get it done. Which is hard, you know, when you're looking after a family and trying to make sure that everyone else is okay. It's sometimes hard to ask for that kind of thing. But yeah, I definitely would have done that more if I was doing it again. And it's sort of identifying chunks of time that work for you. So obviously, as a teacher in the holidays, I could reserve time specifically for working on my thesis. And I think as well, so I had a change in supervisor. I mean, it all happened, honestly, but I had a change in supervisor at a quite a critical time. And the lady that I was with at first, because she was there at the sort of inception of this new idea and understood the restrictions and kind of challenges that were posed doing research during COVID, she was really understanding about how I was able to kind of do this research. My second supervisor came in later and hadn't really understood that journey that I'd been through at the time, and wasn't as understanding, I would say, about the pockets of time that I had to work. So I think clear communication from both sides there, from myself and from a supervisor, about when I am able to work. It's not that I couldn't do the work, and it wasn't that I wasn't going to do the work. That was never, ever going to be the case. But sometimes the only time that I could do that thing was, you know, I've got a week at Easter. So I think that was another kind of learning point for me, was about communication, about availability, not to mess anyone around and not to be a pain, but just actually being clear about what I was able to do, alongside asking more for what I needed from the people around me at home.
Thank you, Beth. I think that resonates with me as well, about what you do at certain times, you know, from doing my own doctorate as well. And I think it took me a while to realize that there's different types of work, and sometimes I was in the headspace to do one type and sometimes I just wasn't, and I could have spent a day, you know, pointlessly trying to, knowing that it was taking me a day when it could take me an hour tomorrow, you know, if I'm in a different headspace. So that resonates with me as well. Will we just open it up to the floor, see if anyone wants to pop in with a question or comments, you know, whether it be a question or a contribution from your own experiences?
I'll pop in there if you don't mind. Thanks, Niamh. Hi, Beth. Thanks a million for that input. I think I'm on day 7 of my journey. When you said 7 years, I thought, holy moly, right? Okay, this is going to be fun. And then I've got a 7-year-old behind me home from sick from school as well. So it was all the 7s resonated with me today. But just to say thank you for that, I actually found it very reassuring that you know it's a journey and you'll get there. But my question was, because I'm started my homework already that we've had, and a piece that I read this morning was, when you find your purpose, that you may have to change your instruments of data collection, etc., based on your purpose. And you mentioned that you did that.
Yeah.
And I ask, like, did you feel that set you back, or in actual fact, when you came to the realization that this is the right way to collect, that it actually expedited your study, or how did you manage that piece?
So I think for me, this was all within that kind of the context of COVID. And I'd originally, as I said, I was going to do a mixed methods, going to have a questionnaire involved. And I felt at the time that collecting data through a questionnaire when people were isolating and going through such a difficult time just wouldn't have been the appropriate way to do this. I thought it would be a very kind of harsh way of collecting data. And so for me, the circumstances dictated that choice of instrument. And I absolutely stand by that decision. The richness of the data that I had, but also the connections that I made with people. I mean, there were moments where we weren't talking at all about research, because actually people were really lonely and isolated, and they wanted to tell me about other things. And so I really, that meant that I had some very long interviews at times. But I think that was important for me because of what was happening. And I guess it's that kind of, it sounds really, really cheesy, but it's kind of staying true to yourself. And I knew that what I was doing before wasn't right. I trusted that gut instinct and got advice. You know, I didn't just go off, you know, a crazy woman and start interviewing people and not really thinking about the consequences of that. I absolutely talked it through with my supervisor and gained that insight into what I was doing. But yeah, I felt confident in that change because it just wasn't right. What did I want from that situation? Actually, I wanted to hear people's experiences and I wanted to be able to compare and contrast them. It did mean that there was, so when it came to my Viva, the thing that I was really concerned about was my methodology, because I knew that this research had taken place during COVID and there were certain things we couldn't do and certain things that I did in much more of a rush because of needing to collect that data at that specific time. My original idea was sort of much more carefully planned. And so I was concerned about those questions just because I kind of, not that they were wrong. As I say, I fully stand behind what I decided to do, but to outsiders who were not part of that decision-making process, I wanted to make sure that I could explain and articulate why we did things in the way that we did. And I was very pleased getting through that part of my Viva and talking about that. And there wasn't any problem with it because it was all kind of common sense and tracked and justified. But I was aware that I was kind of going with what felt right at the time. And then we got onto the findings, and that was the bit that was really good fun to talk about because that was the really interesting bit for everybody involved in my Viva. But yeah, I think it's about, you don't always have to stick with the plan if the plan isn't right for the situation. And it's okay to be pragmatic about those decisions that you're making and common sense. And as long, you know, it's got to be rooted in you know, research principles and, you know, ethics. But yeah, getting the right instrument, I think, really does help with richness and kind of quality of the data that you're having. So don't be afraid of changing your mind if you look at what you've done and think, actually, no, this isn't going to give me what I really want from this situation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Beth. I've written pivot in big capital letters here. And I might look up, you know, that clip of Chandler and Ross trying to get the couch up the stairs, pivot in Friends as well. So I might do that as well. Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking actually something that Niamh said about my the fact I haven't done any slides. I kind of wanted this to be a chat, and so thank you for kind of furiously writing notes. If anybody wants any more details about what I've done, I have summaries, so I'm really happy to email that on. I just didn't really want to distract from what I was talking about by putting the slide there, and hopefully it allows some flexibility in terms of what we discuss as well. Has anybody else got? Oh, hang on, Marie has a question.
I have. Sorry, I was just trying to get unmuted there. It's a bit of a question, but I suppose more of a statement, really. First of all, congratulations on your doctorate. That's fantastic. And also thank you for a really interesting talk there. I always find it so fascinating to hear people's journeys through these. And while we might not have pandemics thrown at us going forward, hopefully we won't, there will be other crises that occur in one way or another for many, you know. And I just think, even myself, I made changes. I was 6 months after studying one topic very similar, so that resonated, decided actually this wasn't quite working for me, so I needed to change it. And I think that's really important to do that. It's not just about what you're forced to change, but also if things don't feel quite right, it's coming back to that, you know, your feelings as a researcher as well, because that maintains the motivation and engagement of you going through. You need to be thoroughly interested. Even with that really heightened interest, there's going to be times when your motivation drops and you kind of think, oh gosh, I've got to get going with this again. So if you're not at that heightened level to start with about your subject matter, then that's where it can be incredibly challenging. But also forced changes, you know, you've already highlighted that with the pandemic. For me, that was recruitment. I struggled with recruitment, so I had to change all my methods, and like you, had to do that really quickly, not quite as thought through as the original plan. But again, you make a really valid point there in terms of, if you can justify why you've done what you've done and soundly justify that, then that's acceptable. Well, you know, things don't go through in this straight linear way in these journeys. So I think you'd answered the question about what changes you would make if you could do this again. For me, it's about, what have you learned about yourself as a researcher coming through this?
Well, I really like qualitative, and I wouldn't like to ever put myself in one camp or the other, because, you know, again, it's about what's right for the situation. I felt very overwhelmed at first, because after I'd done the transcription and I got all of these words, it sort of like felt like this, they were floating around above my head, this huge cloud of words, and what do I do with them, and how do you package those words into something that is robust in terms of analysis, and also how do you communicate that in a way to people who weren't experiencing those interviews. And I was a bit scared of it, if I'm honest. At first I thought, gosh, this is a tall order, but I think, particularly because of the situation and what a personal experience it was for everybody, and you know, difficult times for everybody as well, I'm really proud to be able to share those stories, because I think in life in general, actually, it's quite easy, not necessarily to forget that COVID happened. You know, we do have reminders all of the time, but it is easy to forget in the day-to-day how education was different during that time. And also, as educators, we are still dealing with those repercussions with young people and with adults who were learning at the time, and missed a lot of kind of key building blocks, both emotionally and education, like academically as well. So yeah, I am less scared of qualitative. In fact, I think it's a wonderful thing if you want to look at anything in depth, and it brings real humanity to what you're investigating. So I think that's how it's changed me as a researcher. I absolutely would choose to do that as my method of research again.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Your values certainly coming through. For your own personal values are coming through. You know, you've talked about values for different people throughout this, but certainly your own are shining through here. So thank you. Thanks for that. Neve, is it back to you, or anybody else? Any questions?
Free for all, I think, Maria. We will try and finish up a few minutes before the hour, right? We're conscious, you know, you're given your lunchtime and you all likely have you know, places to go. But there's a few other hands up here. Bernie, I might pass it over to you first, if that's okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Great to be here, and congratulations, Beth, on your doctorate and on your lovely presentations without a PowerPoint. I found that very refreshing, I have to say.
Thank you. Or crazy. It's one of the two, right?
I was thinking, as someone who is no longer myself an early career researcher, but now moving into the supervision space. And I was thinking, if I could sum up what you've shared with us, it's really about courage, isn't it? There's a lot of courage in changing methodology, in courage in saying I need my time, even if you would want to have more than what you requested or asked for. And I'm thinking, what implications does this have for supervision, for supervisors? You know, do we train them properly? How in my role do I help my PhD students to find that courage? I think we've got to do more of that, more capacity building in that space. It's not just I'll guide you on how to write a thesis, but how are you going to change your identity as a researcher? And how are you going to build the courage? Because you have. And I think that's important. Yeah, I don't know. That's been a good reflection for me about that other side. Yeah.
No, I really appreciate you saying that, Bernie, and particularly as I said, you know, I changed supervisors, and there's definitely one style that worked better for me. And I realized, you know, we can't all get on all of the time, and you know, people work differently. But I think trust is really important, and I'm a hard worker who was always going to get the job done. I just, because of other life things happening in life alongside my research, there were other priorities for me that I also had to kind of look after as well. And so I think being trusted to get on with it and do that in a timely fashion, but also in a way that worked for me, that was something that was important personally to me. And it developed me as an autonomous learner and helped me to kind of think about the questions that I needed to ask. You know, what were the really important questions when I had that time to kind of really think about how things were going to communicate with my supervisor.
Thanks.
Anybody else?
Judy, were you going to jump in? Did you have a hand up as well there?
It was only if no one else had a question. I'm happy to give space to anyone else if they had a final question. Yeah, okay, well, I'll dive in. Thank you so much, Beth. It's been really, really fantastic. And just to echo everyone else's, I'm inspired to use PowerPoints less frequently. I think that's a takeaway for many people in this room today. You know, if in doubt, just speak, and it's so much more. I think there's an authenticity that comes with that. You know, you telling your story and us seeing you tell your story as well. It really added to the connection, and it was really great to hear from you. So thank you for your contribution, and congratulations, of course, Dr. Holmes.
It still doesn't really feel real. I'm massively in the imposter syndrome situation at the moment. So
I know, change your ID and change your, you know, your bank cards and things just to make it official.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. It was really interesting and a fantastic question from Bernie. Actually, I've written that down because I'm just entering the supervision space myself, and that's really interesting about what you've said about trust in response to Bernie's question. I was curious about the changes that you've noticed in yourself, because of course 7 years ago when you start, or more than 7 years ago when you started this journey, how you used to think, how you would investigate something, or all these sorts of things. What would you say some of the biggest areas of growth that you've experienced, be it on a personal level, researcher level, even practitioner level, over the course of your doctoral study?
Well, I think it's been meant, values have obviously been a big part of what I was researching. I think this has been a really reflective process about my own educational values. And also, you know, I've mentioned the educational climate at the moment, and looking around me in my job, I get to go into lots of different schools to support our beginner teachers. And it's really interesting looking at how values are reflected in schools. And that's something that I want to carry on to research into. I think that's the path that I would like to take. So yeah, it's absolutely shaped how I look at education, and it's made me really think about the positive things that I may have done, but also, you know, in the past, particularly when I've been a leader myself, some of those conversations that I've had, and looking at how to motivate people to be on board with ideas, for example. So yes, I think reflection on my own values and looking at the values around me has definitely been an area of growth. I think it's given me confidence in questioning things and in finding out things for myself, and also in forming my own opinion and speaking about it. I would, you know, I would research into a situation first, but I feel, yeah, I feel more confident in talking about what I believe in and in putting ideas forward. But because of the kind of the leadership element of my research, I would hope that I do that in a collaborative way by talking to people, and also actually it's about listening to. So those stories that the narratives that came about because of my research, that was about listening to people's stories, looking for patterns and finding, you know, common ground with what those people were saying. So I would hope that I've developed as a listener as well, in terms of working with my colleagues and the students that I'm supporting at the moment.
Thanks very much.
Beth, no, I think I speak on behalf of everyone when I say thank you so much for that presentation, and just for how candid you were in that. Because I mean, I think we often hear about, you know, the end product of research, and we often hear about the successes. And that's, I suppose, you know, what a lot of this type of, you know, lunchtime session could focus on. But what you've done here is you've really just opened up that space of, like, you know, it isn't that straight line, that you're going from A to B, and talking about that meandering and some of the challenges that are there, and doing that so honestly and openly. And like, that's invaluable for us here to hear, because we learn from that. And it's important that we keep talking about the complexities that can be there and the realities of that as well, to continue to make, you know, really effective research as well. So thank you so much for your contributions today. And I think it really echoed, like, you know, that conversational way that you did it. I think part of what we're trying to do here in the Emergent Researcher Rig is to create that community of emergent researchers where we can support each other and engage with one another in that way as well. And that really encapsulated that today, what you did for us. And yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
A pleasure. Thank you. It sounds really cheesy again, but it's really nice. It's really refreshing to be able to talk about it. I kind of felt often during this, it was quite isolating, and I was kind of in my own little research bubble, and actually being able to share it with people who are kindly listening and engaging and asking questions, I would really appreciate that. And I'm really happy. I don't know how this worked, Neve, but I'm happy to share my email. If anybody would like to contact me about anything that I've spoken about today, they are absolutely more than welcome.
Brilliant. That's great, Beth. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for attending as well. We'll definitely follow up with that. And look, please do keep an eye out, because we will have, you know, upcoming events throughout the year as well. So do keep an eye out. And yeah, we hope to see you all very soon. Thank you so much, Beth, and take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Beth. Congratulations.
Thanks, Beth.
Bye.
Bye-bye.